Did you know that one of America's greatest movies about fighting for what's right almost never got made? Frank Capra had to fight the U.S. Senate itself to release Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. Real senators didn't want this film shown to the world. It made them look bad. The story is about a regular man who stands up against corruption and that terrified powerful people. But what's even more amazing, the movie almost became something completely different. The script was rewritten dozens of times. Actors almost quit. Famous politicians tried to stop it, and yet the film became a masterpiece that still inspires people 85 years later. Everything about this movie is filled with wild, unexpected stories. Let's dive in and discover 20 weird and amazing facts about Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. Fact number 20. Jimmy Stewart almost wasn't Jimmy Stewart in his own star-making role. This might sound strange, but Jimmy Stewart almost didn't play Jefferson Smith. The studio had other ideas. They wanted Cary Grant for the part. Grant was already a huge star. He was charming and handsome, and audiences loved him everywhere. But Frank Capra, the director, said no to something nobody else saw. He believed Jimmy Stewart had something real inside him, something that couldn't be faked, something raw and honest. When Jimmy Stewart read the script, he knew this role would change everything. He felt it in his bones. Stewart wasn't a big action hero. He was a regular guy. That was exactly what the movie needed. He came from Indiana. His father was a hardware store owner. He knew small towns and simple people. Took the role. He risked everything. If the movie flopped, his career might end before it started, but he believed in it anyway. This gamble made him a legend. What looked like a risky choice became the smartest decision Hollywood ever made. 19. The Senate scenes were shot inside a real Senate chamber. Frank Capra wanted something nobody had ever filmed before. He wanted to shoot scenes inside the actual United States Senate chamber in Washington, D.C. This seems simple today, but in 1939, it was impossible. The Senate didn't allow movies. They didn't allow cameras in that sacred space. Capra didn't give up. He kept asking. He kept pushing. Finally, someone said maybe. The Senate allowed him to film for one single day. One day. Think about that pressure. The entire crew had to work fast. Every camera angle had to be perfect. Every light had to be in exactly the right place. There were no second chances. Real senators walked past the set while they filmed. Real people who made actual laws stood near the cameras. The weight of history was everywhere. Capra's team set up equipment that had never been inside those walls before. They filmed some of the movie's most powerful scenes in that one magical day. The reality of that space seeped into the film. You can feel it. It's not a fake set. It's the real thing. Authenticity is something you can't create in a studio, no matter how much money you spend. Fact number 18. Frank Capra fought the U.S. Senate to release the film. After the movie was finished, something shocking happened. The United States Senate tried to stop it from being released. Senators watched the film and got angry. They said it made the government look stupid and crooked. They said it would hurt America's reputation around the world. They wanted the movie banned. This was incredible. A government trying to silence a story about a man fighting government corruption. The irony was perfect, but it was also very real and very scary. Frank Capra had to defend his film like it was his own child. He wrote letters. He gave speeches. He explained that the movie wasn't attacking America, it was celebrating what America could be. He said the film showed that one honest person could make a difference. That's not an attack on democracy, he argued. That's the heart of democracy. The Senate leaders eventually backed down, but they were furious. They gave their approval, but grudgingly. Some senators never forgave Capra. It took courage to stand against the government itself. What looked like a simple movie became a battle for free speech. Number 17. The famous filibuster scene took almost 3 days to film. The most powerful moment in the entire movie is when Jefferson Smith stands alone in the Senate and speaks for hours. He talks and talks. He refuses to stop. His voice gets hoarse. Tears run down his face. He's trying to save his father's name and stop a bill he knows is wrong. This scene is absolutely mesmerizing. But here's the thing. It took almost 3 entire days to film. 3 days. Jimmy Stewart had to deliver the same passionate speech over and over and over. Take after take, angle after angle, sometimes from the front, sometimes from the side, sometimes from far away, sometimes in close-up. Stewart's voice actually did get hoarse. His tears were sometimes real. Sometimes he had to cry on command. By the end of the third day, he was completely exhausted. His throat hurt. His body ached. His emotions were completely drained. Capra knew he had captured something extraordinary. The repetition actually helped. Each take got a little better. Jimmy Stewart found new depths in the character with every single attempt. What looked like one continuous, powerful moment in the final film was actually born from exhaustion and repetition and craft. Fact number 16. The actor playing the corrupt senator almost walked off set. Claude Rains played the villain. He played Senator Payne, the corrupt politician who betrays Jefferson Smith. Claude Rains was a brilliant actor. He had played major roles in huge films. But something unexpected happened while filming. He started to deeply disagree with how the character was written. He didn't like being portrayed as completely evil. He thought the character needed more depth. He wanted audiences to understand why Senator Payne made the choices he made. He wanted to show that corruption doesn't happen because people are born bad. It happens because good people make small compromises, one after another, until they've become something they never intended to be. This was actually a really smart observation. Claude Rains almost refused to continue, ready to leave the production. But Frank Capra listened to him. Really listened. They talked for hours. They discussed the character's past. They talked about his motivations. Capra made small changes to scenes. He added moments where you could see Rains's character struggling with his own conscience. In the end, Claude Rains stayed. His performance became something layered and complex and almost tragic. Instead of creating a flat villain, they created a man worth understanding. What could have been a disaster became an improvement to the entire film. Fact number 15. A real political scandal happened while they were still filming. While the crew was in the middle of production, a genuine scandal rocked Washington, D.C. A real senator was caught doing something corrupt. A real politician was exposed for taking illegal money. It was exactly like the story in the movie. This wasn't planned. It wasn't publicity. It was pure coincidence. The timing was shocking. Suddenly, Frank Capra's fictional story didn't feel fictional anymore. It felt like he had predicted reality. Or maybe he had simply captured something true about politics and power that already existed. The studio started to panic. They worried that releasing the movie now would seem like they were making fun of the government during a time when everything was already chaotic. But the scandal also proved that the movie was necessary. People needed to see a story about someone fighting corruption. They needed to believe that one person could make a difference. Accidental timing gave the film even more power. What looked like bad luck for publicity actually became the best advertisement possible. The real world had validated the film's message. Fact number 14. They filmed a completely different ending. Believe it or not, Frank Capra shot 2 different endings for this movie. The first ending was darker, more tragic. The original version didn't give you the hope and triumph that the final film provided. The early version, Jefferson Smith's fight felt more hopeless. Corruption seemed more powerful. The character paid a higher price for standing up. Capra filmed this darker ending completely. He watched it in preview screenings. The audiences hated it. They left the theater feeling sad and defeated. They didn't feel inspired. They felt crushed. Capra realized something important. He wasn't making a documentary about how government actually works. He was making a fable, a story about human spirit, a tale about why we should never give up fighting for what's right. He went back and reshot the ending, made it more hopeful. He showed how the truth could come out, how corruption could be exposed, how one brave person really could make a difference. The second ending felt true to the movie's message. It honored what the character had fought for. Audiences left theaters crying, but they cried with hope instead of hopelessness. The power of choosing the right ending changed everything about how people experienced this story. Fact number 13. Jimmy Stewart rewrote part of his famous speech himself. The filibuster scene is filled with words that Jimmy Stewart actually wrote. Not all of them, but some. Capra gave Stewart freedom to improvise and add his own thoughts. Stewart knew his character deeply, understood what Jefferson Smith believed, understood what would come out of Jefferson Smith's mouth if he were really standing in that Senate chamber fighting for his life. Stewart added his own lines. He changed some of Capra's words to make them sound more natural. He added pauses where he thought a real person would pause, added emotion where he felt it should live. This was unusual in 1939. Directors usually wanted actors to say exactly what was written. No changes, no additions. But Capra trusted Stewart completely. He knew that Stewart's instincts were perfect. The collaboration between director and actor created something magical. It didn't feel like Stewart was reciting dialogue. It felt like he was really speaking from his heart in that moment. The authenticity of those words came partly from the script and partly from Jimmy Stewart's own soul. What could have been a stiff, written speech became a conversation with the audience. Fact number 12. The town of Jefferson Smith's origin doesn't actually exist. Jefferson Smith's hometown is called Willet Creek, the small town where he grew up, where he learned right from wrong, where he became the kind of person who would stand up against corruption. But here's the thing. Willet Creek isn't real. You can't visit it. It doesn't exist on any map. Frank Capra created it completely. He worked with his art team to design a town that felt true to the American heartland, a town that every audience member could recognize as their own hometown, even if it was completely fictional. The town had a river. It had green trees. It had ordinary buildings where ordinary people lived ordinary lives. It was beautiful without being fancy. It was simple and honest. This imaginary place became so real in viewers' minds that people actually tried to find it. After the movie came out, tourists drove around looking for Willet Creek. They wanted to see where Jefferson Smith came from. They wanted to walk the streets he had walked, wanted to touch the places that made him who he was. The power of Capra's storytelling made something that didn't exist feel more real than places that actually do exist. Fact number 10. Real radio broadcasts interrupted the filming schedule. The movie was being filmed during a time when radio was still the main way people got information. Frank Capra actually wrote the filming schedule around major radio broadcasts. If a big event was happening, he knew his crew and actors would want to listen. So sometimes he scheduled days off during important news events. Sometimes he built listening time into the day. This seems strange now, but radio was everything. It was like the internet of that time. When something important happened in the world, everybody stopped what they were doing to listen. Capra respected that. He didn't fight it. Instead, he worked with it. He understood that his crew was part of the real world, not separate from it. On particular broadcast, the entire set stopped. Everyone gathered around a radio to listen to a speech. Jimmy Stewart stood with the crew. They all listened together. The experience of hearing real politicians speak while they were filming a movie about politics added something interesting to the atmosphere on set. What could have been seen as a distraction became part of the creative process. It kept everyone connected to the real world they were trying to capture in their film. Fact number 9. The Boy Scouts were recruited as extras and their reactions were real. Climax of the film, there are scenes with Boy Scouts. They were actual Boy Scouts, not actors. Frank Capra recruited real scouts to appear in the movie. Why? Because he wanted authentic reactions. He wanted real young people who believed in the values that Jefferson Smith was fighting for. The Boy Scouts understood honor and loyalty and standing up for what's right. They weren't pretending. They weren't playing characters. They were being themselves. The Boy Scouts didn't know the exact plot. They didn't know what was happening. So their confusion and their concern and their determination were completely real. Capra filmed them without telling them everything. This created authentic reactions that no trained child actor could have given. The young faces in those scenes are genuinely moved. They're genuinely worried. They're genuinely hopeful. The choice to use real people instead of professional actors added an emotional weight to those scenes. Feel the difference. You can sense that those aren't performers. Those are real human beings experiencing real emotions about something they believe in. What looked like a casting decision was actually a brilliant creative choice that deepened the film's power. Fact number 8. The entire Senate chamber crowd wore costumes designed to match real senators. Creating a Senate chamber scene required hundreds of people, all those senators sitting in their chairs, all those congressional staff members walking around. The costume designer faced an incredible challenge. She didn't just dress people in generic suits. She had to match what real senators actually wore. She studied photographs of actual senators. She researched what politicians wore in 1939. She wanted the fashion to be historically accurate. She wanted the details to be correct. Every single extra in that scene was costumed to perfection. The result was a set that looked completely authentic. The audience watching the movie didn't notice the costumes because the costumes were so right. When costumes are good, you don't see them. You just see the person. You see the character. You see the government. This invisible work, this detail that nobody consciously notices, is what makes the scene feel real. The production designer and costume designer did work that was so accurate it disappeared. That's the highest compliment you can give a craftsperson. What looked simple was actually incredibly complex and carefully researched. Number 7. Frank Capra's original script had a completely different title. Before it was called Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, the script had another name, called The Gentleman from Montana. Nobody knows exactly why Capra changed it, but Mr. Smith is so much better. It's simpler. It's more universal. Anyone could be a Smith. Any regular person could be a gentleman. It sounds like it could be about anybody. Original title sounded more specific, more limited. Changing 3 words changed everything about how people understood the story. It made the film feel like it could be about them, like they could be the one who stands up. They could be the hero. The new title gave the story a timelessness and a universality that the original didn't have. This simple change affected how audiences connected to the film. It made them feel included in the story instead of watching from the outside. It seemed like a small choice, just 3 words, actually shaped how an entire generation would understand the movie. Number 6. The studio almost sold the film to another country to hide it. Here's something almost nobody knows. The studio was so worried about the Senate's reaction that they actually considered selling the film to another country instead of releasing it in America. They thought about sending it to Europe. They thought about letting it premiere somewhere else where American politics didn't matter. They were genuinely frightened of the government's power. Frank Capra refused, said no. He said this movie was made in America for America. It had to be released in America. If they didn't release it here, they were letting fear win. They were letting censorship win, which gave others courage. Studio executives saw his determination, and they found their own strength. They decided to release the film in America, right here at home. Consequences be damned. It could have been a movie that hid in the shadows, became a movie that stood in the light. Capra's refusal to compromise created a moment that mattered beyond just cinema. It was a moment about freedom. It was a moment about believing that people have the right to see stories that challenge them. Fact number 5. Jimmy Stewart's voice was already famous before this film. Jimmy Stewart had a distinctive voice, high-pitched sometimes, with a stutter when he was nervous or emotional. Before Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, audiences already recognized that voice from radio broadcasts and other films. But this film gave him an entirely new way to use it. In the filibuster scene, his voice becomes an instrument. It cracks with emotion. It gets hoarse from speaking. It wavers with exhaustion and passion. The imperfections in his voice became perfect for this character. A character who wasn't a trained speaker, who wasn't polished or practiced, a character who was just a real human being pouring his heart out. Stewart's natural voice, which might have been seen as a flaw in other roles, became the greatest strength of this role. It made Jefferson Smith believable. It made him human. It made him someone you wanted to believe in. It could have been an obstacle, became an asset. Stewart's voice, unchanged and unpolished, became one of the most memorable voices in cinema history. Fact number 4. Frank Capra fought with the studio about the film's political message. Columbia Pictures, the studio that made this film, wasn't always comfortable with how political it was. They worried about offending powerful people. They worried about being seen as too liberal or too critical of government. And the studio heads had real arguments about the script. Some executives wanted him to soften the message, wanted him to add more scenes that showed government as good and honest. Capra refused every compromise. He said the movie had to be honest. If government had corruption, the movie had to show it. If one person could make a difference, the movie had to celebrate it. He wouldn't water down the message to make powerful people comfortable. These fights were tense. Capra's stubbornness saved the film, protected its integrity, kept its power. If he had compromised, the film would have been forgotten. Instead, his refusal to back down created a masterpiece that still changes people's hearts 85 years later. What looked like a conflict between artist and studio became the thing that preserved the film's greatness. Fact number 3. The film was released exactly when America needed to believe in democracy. The timing of this film's release is almost impossible to believe. It came out in 1939. Just months later, World War II began. America would soon enter the war. Democracy itself felt threatened around the world. Fascism was rising. Dictators were taking over countries. And right before all of this darkness, America got a film about why democracy matters. A film about why one person's voice matters. a film about why it's worth fighting for freedom. People watched this movie and they felt hopeful. They felt like ordinary people could do extraordinary things. They felt like democracy was worth protecting. They went to war carrying the memory of Jefferson Smith in their hearts. This wasn't planned. Nobody knew the war was coming. But the film arrived at exactly the moment when the world would need it most. What looked like coincidence was actually perfect timing. The universe sometimes works in mysterious ways. Fact number 2. The film almost bankrupted Frank Capra. Making this film cost a lot of money. More money than it made back at first. The film wasn't an immediate box office success. It made money, but not enough to cover costs for a few years. Frank Capra had put his own money into the production. He had risked everything financially to tell this story. For a long time, it looked like his gamble would fail. But slowly, people started coming back. They saw it again and again. Teachers showed it in classrooms. People rented it. It played on television. Year after year, it made more money. Eventually, it became one of the most profitable films ever made. But it took time. Capra had to believe in his vision even when the financial numbers didn't look good. He had to trust that the film's message was important enough to matter beyond money. His faith in the story paid off, but he didn't know it would. He just knew it had to be made. What looked like financial disaster became one of cinema's greatest successes. Fact number 1. Jefferson Smith's famous lost telegram actually came from a real historical event. The climax of the film involves a telegram that proves the corruption. This telegram reveals the truth. It saves the day. It's completely fictional, but it was inspired by something that actually happened in American history. Frank Capra based it on real moments when documents and letters changed the course of history. When evidence brought down powerful people. When the truth, once revealed, couldn't be ignored. Capra researched real cases where ordinary people fought corruption and won. He studied how they did it, what tools they used, what techniques worked. He took those real historical elements and wove them into his fictional story. The result is a film that feels true because it's built on truths. The details might be fictional, but the emotional reality is based on real events. People who have studied American history recognize the echoes of real stories in this film. Capra had done his homework. He knew that the best fiction is often the fiction that's closest to truth. What looked like pure imagination was actually rooted in historical reality. Bonus fact, the deleted scene that would have changed everything. In the archives of Columbia Pictures, there exists a scene that was filmed but never included in the final movie. It's a scene where Jefferson Smith visits his father's grave. He stands in a cemetery and talks to his dead father. He asks for strength. He asks for guidance. He promises to fight for what his father believed in. This scene was beautifully filmed. Jimmy Stewart's performance was heartbreaking. But Frank Capra decided to remove it. Why? Because he realized that showing Jefferson Smith asking for help would weaken the audience's belief that he could stand alone. The power of the character came from his solitude, from standing completely alone against the entire government, from believing so deeply in what was right that he didn't need anyone else to validate him. The scene with his father while moving would have suggested that Jefferson Smith needed permission from the past. Capra understood that the story needed him to be independent. The decision to cut this scene was painful. It was a good scene. But good scenes sometimes have to go if they weaken the larger vision. Capra knew that sacrifice. He knew that sometimes you have to destroy something beautiful to create something greater. The deleted scene reminds us that filmmaking is about choices, about what you keep and what you let go, about how every decision shapes the final truth, old tools, new magic. The past lived in the memory of discarded film, but the future belonged to what remained. Mr. Smith Goes to Washington is more than just a movie about politics. It's a story about the human spirit. It's about what happens when an ordinary person decides to stand up for what's right, even when standing alone. It's about believing that one voice can matter, that one person can change the world. Everything about this film, from the casting to the locations to the deleted scenes, was built to tell that story with as much power as possible. Frank Capra and Jimmy Stewart and everyone who worked on this movie understood something essential. They understood that the world doesn't change because of big, important people. It changes because regular people find courage they didn't know they had. It changes because someone decides that principles matter more than comfort. It changes because one person says no when everyone else says yes. 85 years have passed since this movie was released, and its message has never been more important. We live in a time when people feel small, when power seems too big to fight, when corruption seems too common to challenge. And then we watch Jefferson Smith stand in the Senate and refuse to give up. And we feel something stir inside us. We feel like maybe we could be brave too. Maybe we could stand up. Maybe our voice could matter. That's the real magic of this film. Not the cinematography or the acting or the historical details, though all of those are magnificent. The real magic is that it makes you believe in yourself. It makes you believe that democracy is worth fighting for. It makes you believe that one person really can make a difference. If you enjoyed discovering these 20 weird and amazing facts, please subscribe for more. Every movie hides a truth inside it. And we'll keep uncovering them one story at a time. Thank you for watching. Thank you for caring about cinema. Thank you for believing that stories matter, because they do. Now go out there and be someone's Jefferson Smith.